I'm going to be showing a presentation, and at the end of it, and I'm going to be talking, and there's going to be some interaction. If we're not going to use the chat, then we can just speak. That's fine. We don't need to use the chat. There's going to be some interaction between us though, and I'm going to be asking you to join in, but there is no wrong or right answers, so don't worry about anything like that. And it's a really informal, friendly session just to enable us to learn more. So yeah, please don't worry that there's anything that's going to be noted down or anything like that. It's absolutely fine. And as I said, there's no wrong answers. So I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to start the presentation, but any comments in it where it says write something in the chat, just ignore that, because we can speak instead. So hopefully a presentation will come up. Can everybody see that okay? Give me a thumbs up.
Yep.
Or say yes, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, so as I say, this is a Dementia Friends information session. I've been a Dementia Friends Champion with the Alzheimer Society now for gosh, I think for about 7 years, and it's a voluntary role. I'm by no means an expert on dementia, although I do have some personal experience because fairly recently my mum was diagnosed with dementia, so I have some experience, but I wouldn't claim to be an expert. And this session isn't setting out to make anyone become an expert. It's just to raise awareness really and to help us in our learning journey. The Dementia Friends sessions were devised in collaboration with groups of people who are actually living with dementia. So what these dementia sessions are all about really is what people living with dementia would like you guys and all of the public to know about dementia, because I think we read a lot in the newspapers and the headlines which really, you know, often present quite a negative picture, and I think people with dementia actually wanted their side of the story to be told and how it is for them, which I think is really important, and we call that lived experience, don't we, which is really important. So ignore about saying hello in the chat because we've all said hello, I think, so that's lovely. And we'll just move on to the next slide. So yes, so don't worry about using the chat because we're going to just chat to each other, which is much nicer, isn't it? So that's good. So we're going to start, everybody. If you could just think about the first word that comes into your head when somebody says the word dementia to you. So have a little think about that. Now, don't worry, it can be anything. Try and be completely honest. There's no right or wrong answer, and it's not a trick question. So if everybody could think about the first word, and then when you're ready, have we got the function where we can put our hands up, or just put your hand up, or just use the icons to let me know if you'd be willing to share your word? Great. Okay, so we've had fear, we've had lonely, forgetfulness, loss of identity. I think that was it, wasn't it? Anybody else before we move on to the next slide? It's absolutely fine. You don't have to contribute a word, so that's fine. So let's move on to the next slide, and apologies if I can't see you and you have asked to, but I'm sure you won't mind if we move on. So next slide. And this is words that other people have come up with. So we've got plague, wanderer, sufferer, misery, hopeless. Can anyone tell me what all these words have got in common? Would you agree with me if I said they were all quite negative? They're all very negative, aren't they? And of course we know, because I'm sure some people in this group, and I certainly now have lived experience of looking after someone with dementia, that dementia can be a very challenging condition. So by no means do we want to sugarcoat the situation. You know, it can be difficult, but what people living with dementia have told us, particularly when they read headlines in the press, you can see there's a sort of fake newspaper on the slide which says dementia sufferers robbed of £100 million. And we read a lot in the press, don't we, about ageing in generally, the ticking time bomb, you know, lots of older people are coming along. There's not so many of us in the younger generation. So generally speaking, this constant sort of negative press particularly makes people, the people that we've spoken to with dementia, feel quite, it makes their situation feel a bit worse in a way. And what they were asking through these Dementia Friends sessions, if people could perhaps try and not talk about dementia in such a negative way, particularly in the press. And I know obviously sometimes we need to use negative words, but we can sometimes find other words to substitute. So for example, if a lot of people will say, oh, I'm looking after my mum and she's suffering with dementia. Well, I'm looking after my mum and she has got dementia, but I don't think it's true actually that she's suffering, certainly not all the time. So that word is very, very negative, isn't it? But actually I prefer, and the people living with dementia would prefer, for everyone to say that somebody is living with dementia. So rather than say suffering with dementia, they would say they're living with dementia, because that's actually correct, isn't it? They are living with dementia, and sometimes they might suffer or they might struggle, but other times they might be having a really good time. So I think we need to think about the way that we speak and the things that we say, and how that can create a perception which actually makes it worse for people living with dementia and the people that look after them. So I hope that makes sense, everybody. We can certainly, if it doesn't, or you've got any questions, then please put your hand up. We'll move on to the I've moved on to the next slide, but that's one of the first things that people living with dementia wanted everyone to know, was that it would be better not to have it spoken about in such sort of negative way all the time. So I think that makes sense. It did to me when somebody first explained it to me. So the Dementia Friends movement, it's run by the Alzheimer Society, and it's a social action movement to try and increase understanding and inspire action. And it's really sets out to help people to understand 5 key messages. And the 5 key messages about dementia were all created with people living with dementia. So it's what they want people to understand. So we've got a little bit of a quiz here now. Okay, so there are the answers there. Right, so coming back to number 1, dementia is not a natural part of aging. A lovely picture of someone out on their bike there. So it just goes to show that there's still stuff that we can do. So dementia is certainly not a natural part of aging, but it is caused by diseases of the brain. And there's a lovely image there of somebody's brain. And I think if I click on next slide, we'll see the brain is full of little connections, or in this image, little light bulbs, okay? And what dementia does, unfortunately, is it gradually, it will cause those connections or those light bulbs to flicker. And as the condition progresses, then that flickering, some of the light bulbs go out, and then gradually they go out. So that's why people start with memory loss, but sometimes things do progress and they do get worse. That's why it's really important to make the most of living well with dementia, you know, as much as you can. Right, okay, so what is dementia? So dementia is an umbrella term, and there are lots of different types of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is one type, vascular dementia is another type, dementia with Lewy bodies, frontal temporal dementia, but there are lots of different types. So no two people, some people get the same type of dementia, but everyone's experience will be very different. Dementia is a term that covers lots of different conditions, but they all are classed as diseases of the brain. Right, so back to the key messages, number 3, dementia is not just about losing your memory. So it's, I think quite a lot of people, and I certainly did when I first knew anything about dementia, just assumed that somebody with dementia loses their memory, but it's a bit more complicated than that. And some of you might have experience of this through people that you know. So we might start to have trouble with motor skills. So motor skills are when we're using our hands to do things, to carry out tasks, say to hammer a nail into something, or to open a car door. So those are classed as motor skills. Sequencing. Does anyone want to tell me what they think sequencing might be all about? So, for example, making a cup of tea, we take it for granted because we know the sequences, don't we, to make cups of tea so easily. But for somebody with dementia, that might become very challenging because they might not be able to remember what order to do things in. Okay. So next one is changes in inhibition. So sometimes, not very often, but sometimes people with dementia who perhaps have never uttered a swear word in their whole life, they might suddenly start to say swear words. So it's just little things like that. Now doesn't happen to everyone. In fact, it's quite rare, but it can mean people become what's known as disinhibited. So whereas once they were very reserved and shy, they might become very extrovert. Now, this can be quite a positive thing, actually, because sometimes people who've been quite shy all their lives and haven't tried, say, I don't know, singing or anything like that, they can suddenly find they're really enjoying activities like that. So it's not always a bad thing, but it is something that can happen. Also, dementia can affect people's vision. So it can mean that you can normally, if we would say to walk into a shop and there was one of those big black mats that they put down when it's raining, that's perfectly normal to us because our eyesight's functioning normally. But with someone with dementia, they sometimes see carpet patterns and things around them, not as they used to. So, for example, the black mats that are used to stop you slipping over when you go into a shop when it's raining, that might look like a hole in the ground, or it might look like something that's dangerous. So that might make the person quite reasonably say, well, I'm not walking across that mat. And it's helpful, I think, to understand that because it helps us to understand why somebody might be not willing to do something, because to them it might look dangerous, it might not look the same. Okay. And the other thing that can be affected is people's communication skills and their speech and language skills. So they might have problems remembering the right word for something. And I mean, the best advice really for that is just to let people take their time, not to rush them. And sometimes, if they're really struggling, we might, after a little while, try and help them think of the right word that they're looking for. But generally speaking, it's best to let the person try to manage on their own, but sometimes we might chip in and try and think of the right word for them. So there's some of the other aspects that dementia can affect, which is useful, isn't it, to know about? Right, okay, so number 4, and this is my favourite one really, because I think, it's really, really important to remember this. And in my day job, I work for UK Oxfordshire, and I do a lot of creative activities for older people and people living with dementia. And I also used to work in museums and do a lot of creative stuff for older people. So I know that getting older and getting dementia is by no means means that you can't live well and you can't enjoy yourself, because I've had more fun in groups of people with dementia, with singing and creating and talking about old times and doing local history projects than I probably had with any other groups ever. So, and the lovely thing is that people think, well, you know what, I might as well just enjoy myself now because, I've lived my life and it's not, I haven't got anything to prove. So really, it can be a really fun time of life. So it is possible to live well with dementia. And it's really, really important to remember that. And it's important to people with dementia that the rest of us know that as well. Okay. So we've come on to communication. So we've already talked a little bit about this, haven't we, to make sure that we communicate clearly with people with dementia. So make sure that we listen. I'm always very keen to sort of not interrupt, but I do interrupt, but also to sort of jump in and try and say things for people. But it's really important to listen carefully and try not to do that and listen to what somebody's saying. When we're with somebody with dementia, it can be easier sometimes if we're in an environment where there's not lots of distractions, so there's not lots of background noise, or very busy train station or something like that. Sometimes we might have to go to the train station, but perhaps try to go at quieter times. And if we want to do an activity, try and pick somewhere where there's not too many distractions. Try to speak clearly, use positive body language, and also always treat, as we would with everybody, treat people with respect. Okay, so key message number 5, there is more to a person than dementia. So it's really important to remember that people have all had really fascinating and interesting lives. They've all achieved lots of different things in their lives, and we need to recognize that and make sure that we don't just think, oh gosh, this person's got dementia and that's the story really about them. Because if you've got dementia, if you try to imagine that, probably the last thing you'd want anyone to talk to you about is dementia. You'd want to be trying to think about other things, wouldn't you, and take your mind off it. So there is more to a person than the dementia. Right, okay. Let's just check the next slide. So Dementia Friends. So becoming a Dementia Friend, I'm hoping at the end of the session everyone will give a thumbs up and say yes, they're happy to become a dementia friend. And there's no firm commitment really, but it's about turning your understanding from today into action if you can. So that could be just a simple thing like sharing information about the Dementia Friends movement on social media, or it could be perhaps trying to reach out or keep in touch with somebody that you know who's got dementia. Or you could let people know more about the Alzheimer's Society, and you could try and remember never to use the word dementia sufferer again, not to use that term, but instead to use positive language like the person is living with dementia. And you do get used to doing that after a while. It took me a while, but after a while you can sort of retrain yourself to use that more positive language, which is really helpful. Okay, so we've just covered what becoming a dementia friend is. So let's move on to the next slide. And yep, that's the next slide. So just to recap the 5 key messages. So dementia is not a natural part of aging. Dementia is caused by diseases of the brain. It's not just about losing your memory, and it is possible to live well with dementia. That's a really important one. And there's more to the person than the dementia. Now, I understand that some of you are going to be going on to work with a group of people who are living with dementia, and you're going to be doing creative activities together. Is that right, Catherine?
Yes, that's correct.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think that number 4 is going to be really important, and really, you're really going to be living that number 4, aren't you? You're going to be helping people with dementia to live well with their dementia and enjoying yourself. So that's really great. So I look forward to hearing more about that. Okay, so the Alzheimer's Society have come up with some quite useful ways, I think, of helping us to understand how dementia might affect somebody, and one of them is this bookcase analogy. Okay, so if you can imagine that all your memories are a bookcase, and your recent memories are on the top shelf and your childhood memories are on the bottom shelf. Okay, so what happens to people with dementia is that the bookcase gets shaken. Okay, it's as if someone's given it a good shake, and it's a big tall bookcase. So what happens when the bookcase gets shaken is that the books on the top shelf, the recent memories, fall off. Okay, so people's recent memory can be quite poor, but their long-term memories, the memories they have from their childhood, can often be really quite clear, quite good. So that's where it could be really lovely to talk to somebody about their childhood, because they have a clearer memory of that than perhaps something that just happened to them. So that's a really useful thing to know, I think. I mean, obviously not everyone's the same, but as a generalization, the recent memories will get dislodged first when somebody has dementia, but as you go down the bookcase to childhood, those memories tend to stay the same, which is often perhaps why somebody who's in their later stages of dementia really enjoys talking about their childhood and has a lot of affinity with their younger days, because they can remember that quite clearly. So that's your factual bookcase. So that's all about the facts that you remember, your skills and your memories. But we also have something called an emotional bookcase. So that's all about feelings and how we experience things and our emotions. So to give an example, somebody might remember from their childhood, or they may not remember that, but they might remember a really good teacher that they had when they were younger. But even when that memory fades, they probably won't forget the feeling of inspiration that that teacher gave them. So feelings that people get from situations. And your emotional bookcase tends to stay fairly intact when you're living with dementia. So even if you don't remember what caused the emotion will still be quite clear. Okay, so a positive example of this is if somebody went for a trip to the seaside and they had a lovely ice cream, they had a really lovely day. In the following few days, the memory of the day out and where they went might become quite vague, but the emotion that was conjured, the feeling happy, feeling inspired, knowing you've had a nice time, that will still remain with the person. So it's quite useful, I think, to understand that as well. So that's an ice cream that you don't remember having, but you remember it made you feel great when you had it. So going back to the 5 key messages again. So number 1, dementia is not a natural part of aging. I think they're going to pop up as I click next slide. Yep, they are. Dementia is caused by diseases of the brain. Dementia is not just about losing your memory. It's possible to live well with dementia, and there's more to the person with dementia. Okay, so as we've already said, becoming a dementia friend is about turning understanding into action. So nothing is too big or small. So you might want to, there's lots of sponsored activities that you can get involved in with the Alzheimer Society, but that might feel like too big a commitment. You can volunteer for an organisation, get involved in fundraising, keep in touch with somebody, or just share that you've become a dementia friend on social media. Anything, any action is great. Now, because a lot of things have done digitally now, in the old days, we'd all be in the room together and I would give you a badge which says I'm a dementia friend, and I can post those to you, Catherine, so you can share them with everyone in the group if you want to. But what we can do now is we can offer you a digital badge. So that's something that you can put on social media, or you can put it on your email signature or whatever you like. So it says I'm a dementia friend, and it, also, you can get them in different languages as well. I think that's Welsh on the right there. So in a minute, I'm going to show you how to get your badge. No, that's a really good question. Yeah. And the answer, I think, would be that actually everybody's journey through dementia is a little bit different. So whilst generally speaking, most people take a journey where their memory does get gradually worse, unfortunately, that whether any of those other things happen can really vary from person to person. So there isn't, I mean, some of them are linked to memory, aren't they? So the communication skills and remembering words and stuff will probably be along the same sort of trajectory as memory. Don't, for example, have any visual problems ever, whereas some people have them, and some people have that and that's their only symptom. So it's really different from person to person. It all depends on what type of dementia you've got, but also even within that, the way everyone is affected by dementia is slightly different. So it's difficult to sort of say that there's a pattern apart from the memory loss generally gets, deteriorates. But yeah, so it's a great question, but no, I think the answer is that it varies from person to person. So becoming a dementia friend. So after what you've heard so far, is everybody feeling happy to go ahead and become a dementia friend? That's brilliant. And I think it'll be really helpful actually, especially with some of the resources that we can share with you when you're going ahead to work on this project that you're working on with Catherine and with Fusion. I think that having done the Dementia Friends session like this, and also to learn a bit more afterwards, I think would be really useful for for that project. So to become a dementia friend now, you can scan the QR code. And I saw someone very brilliantly holding their phone up there to try and scan the QR. I don't know if I can't believe that works, but if it does work, that's great news. You can text Dementia Friends, but I think there might be it would depend on your network rate. That might cost, so be careful about that. Or you can visit the Dementia Friends webinar, Dementia Friends website, sorry, and on that link there, and you can register that you've become a dementia friend. Right, okay, where can we get further support and further information? So I did share with you, didn't I, Catherine, a fact sheet which has got quite a lot of links on it, but I would thoroughly recommend, if everyone's got time, having a look on the Alzheimer Society website, because it is brilliant and it has got loads of resources. It's got fact sheets on all different aspects of dementia. So if you've got a particular area that you want to find out more about, you can just look at these really brilliant, sort of quite concise fact sheets without having to read through, the whole website. So have a look on the Alzheimer Society website. There is a support line, and the telephone number is up there on the screen. There's something called Talking Point. Now, I'm not too sure exactly what that is.
I have actually looked into that one because...
Oh, tell me, Catherine, what is it?
Because we're going to work with young people, and I find oftentimes that young people like to make use of media like WhatsApp and texting and chat functions. So Talking Point is exactly that. It's basically a forum, much like Reddit, but it's all about dementia, and you can basically open a thread there with a question, and there is a very supportive network of people that immediately will respond. And
excellent. Okay, yes, so it's like a sort of instant messenger chat function.
yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, well that sounds really useful, doesn't it? So if you can share that link with everyone, I think that'd be fabulous. And then also there are local branches of the Alzheimer's Society, although in Oxfordshire actually we have an organisation called Dementia Oxfordshire, which is run by Age UK. And I think I'll send you the link, Catherine, shall I? And then you can share it with everybody. So Oxfordshire are very well supported by Dementia Oxfordshire, which is a big organisation that works to support people living with dementia and their carers in Oxfordshire, and they run all sorts of different groups. They have a newsletter. They also have a helpline. So I will share the website address with you, and then if you could share that on, Catherine, I think people might find that as a local resource, will find that really useful. Okay, right, let's have a look. Where are we? Great. Okay, so you have all officially now become Dementia Friends. You've joined the 3.3 million other people who are Dementia Friends, so that's amazing. Thank you very much for listening and for taking interest in dementia.